Welcome into the Solo Shot Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Dom Manna. Happy Solo Shot Saturday, everyone. Sorry for the late start. There have been some technical difficulties on my end, which I'm hoping are righted now. But nonetheless, did not want to miss out on this episode. As you can see, the set has changed as another month of baseball has went by. And I talked about it, how in our month of April, we started seeing teams kind of have their identity start to be made, and we started getting feelings about how their season may or may not go. May was another litmus test. It was another box checked towards what we thought these teams were going to be or in another direction, both positive and negative. And honestly, I think that is just truly amazing that this May month was true madness. It had a lot of ups and downs, and it really was an exciting month of baseball, top to bottom. And you know, there's going to be some bad things that happen every month of baseball. There's going to be some players that go down that you don't want to see get hurt. It's a long season. But unfortunately, the most electric player in the game, Brave star outfielder Ronald Acuna Jr., has torn his ACL ligament and will miss the rest of the 2024 season. So we're just in a space now that sorry guys, I think that the audio is still a little messed up. I'm hearing crazy static in my ears. I'm a little frustrated. And not just about Ronald Acuna's injury, but about the current setup of the show, and I'm hoping that you guys can be hearing me. But yeah, Braves outfielder Ronald Acuna out for the season. He was caught in between bases with his aggressive play style, and now will miss the entire season. He created his own club, obviously, in 2023 with the 40-70 club, a true combination of power and speed that we've rarely seen. There's only been 5 other players that have went 40-40, and none of them went 40-40 twice. So even if Ronald Acuna Jr. was able to steal 40-plus bags this year, the expectation would be that the power takes a step back, or vice versa. If he somehow hit 40 home runs again, that he probably would be somewhere in the 20s or 30s for stolen bases. And this is the problem with players like Ronald Acuna, who are so banked on the speed. And it's that it is such a weapon that not every player possesses, and it's really hard to turn that off. So Ronald Acuna Jr. was unable to turn off the jets, turn off that aggression on the base paths. This is a guy who was playing Venezuelan Winter League baseball the last 2 winters and just did not care. He wanted to be out there on the field. He wanted to represent his country. He wanted to have fun. And this is a guy who has one of the worst contracts in baseball, right up there with his teammate Ozzie Albies, signing that $100 million extension when he was the number 1 prospect in the game, and missed out on hundreds of millions of dollars, most likely, with a possible extension if he just bet on his talent. But I digress. Ronald Acuna Jr., you hate to see that happening, especially when the Braves have already lost their guy, Spencer Strider, to begin the season, my National League Cy Young pick. To lose your best pitcher and your best hitter is never a good sign. Never is. But the bright side of this Brave situation is that they have one of the best cores in Major League Baseball. Ozzy Albies, that I saw, he was a really awesome player up the middle. Matt Olson and Austin Riley at the corners. Their catching situation, Sean Murphy's been banged up, but Travis d'Arnaud is a very, very good catcher that would start on a lot of Major League Baseball teams. And they have cats like Jared Kelenic, Adam Duvall, and Michael Harris out there in the outfield. But the real bright side has been Chris Sale, who made it on my board because he was by far the best pitcher in the National League. In his last 6 starts, Chris Sale is showing vintage Chris Sale in a lot of ways, and it's been amazing to see. He's one of my favorite pitchers in the sport, and the last handful of years, we've seen flashes. There's been an 11K game. There's been some nice outings. We haven't seen him put together a stretch like this in a very long time, and while I don't expect it to go the entire year and him to pitch Cy Young caliber baseball, he's going to contribute to this Braves season, and he's going to be legitimately an all-star in the National League, and that is just awesome to see Chris Sale revive his career. I think the change of scenery was well-deserved and needed, and now he's out there carrying a team that lost its 2 biggest stars, but is still in a really good position to make the playoffs. The Phillies right now are ahead of them, but right now, outside of the Dodgers and the Phillies, the National League's wide open, and the Braves back in 2021 were able to win the World Series without Ronald Acuna Jr., and I think they could potentially still do that again. So I really hate to see a guy that's on a Hall of Fame track like Acuna lose a prime year again like this. He now has missed 2 big chunks of seasons with knee injuries, and it'll be interesting to see when he comes back how much of that aggression he still plays with. We've seen in the league as a whole that stolen base attempts have went significantly down from last season's big jump up with the new rules. I thought that it was going to continue to keep going up as teams figured out how to take advantage of said rules, but it seems that teams are starting to go down on the stolen bases to keep their players healthy and to make business decisions on every attempt. But nonetheless, Ronald Acuna Jr., hope to see him back on the field doing his thing in 2025. Now, there was another big thing that happened here in May, and it flew under the radar, I think, until it officially happened, because I didn't know this was happening yet. But as of this past Wednesday, Major League Baseball has began integrating the Negro League statistics as Major League Baseball stats. Now, for those of you that know the history of the game of baseball, the Negro Leagues were around because Major League Baseball did not allow African-American players to play in their leagues until Jackie Robinson broke the barrier in 1947. So pre-integration in the game, as well as a handful of years after Jackie Robinson made his debut, the Negro Leagues were founded to give those black players a chance to play. And not only did they play against each other, but there were barnstorming games and scrimmages against colleges, against minor league teams, and against Major League Baseball teams. And the Negro League players in those games against Major League teams, their barnstorming exhibition games that did not count towards Major League records, they were 35 games over 500. There were some of the best players to ever play the game in the Negro Leagues. Josh Gibson, who is getting the most fame of all because he is now the second best home run per at bat in Major League Baseball history with over 700 career home runs. He's a guy who is right up there all time in on base percentage, OPS, slugging percentage. He was a absolute monster, and he took over the crown for highest career batting average over Ty Cobb with this integration. Now, Josh Gibson, even if you don't know too much about Negro League Baseball, you've probably heard the name because he is one of 2 or 3 names that gets talked about a lot. Satchel Paige is the other one who, while he did play Major League Baseball, was in his true prime back in the negro league. But there are so many other amazing players that I'm excited that baseball is finally, long overdue, allowing fans to read about, to see stats. Most of all, to me, Oscar Charleston, who was the Willie Mays of his league, the first 5-tool threat, a guy who hit for batting average, 3rd all time now, a guy who had power, speed, great arm, and played great defense in the outfield, a true 5-tool guy. Great to see him get his name in the news and getting jersey sales up for Oscar Charleston because he's truly one of the greatest players to ever live. I have him on my top 10 center fielder list already, and now with the integrated stats, he's just going to move up from my 7th spot that I had him in to probably top 5 all time. Then you have Henry Pop Lloyd, who Babe Ruth said is the best player he ever saw. Second baseman that had a ton of speed and hit for a really high average. You have Buck Leonard, who in his 7-year peak slashed 345 with a 480 on base and a 600 slug, averaging 37 home runs in 135 RBIs in 82 game seasons. Absolute monster. Turkey Stearns. It is just, the list goes on. And I will leave some links in the description below for you to go check out and read up about these players through the Negro League Museum website, as well as where their stats are being posted, because it is true baseball research. It is true baseball just integration, and it is one of the biggest things to happen in baseball in a long time. I am just so blessed to have been able to see this, because it should have happened before I was born, and the fact that it's finally happened now is well deserved. When baseball first integrated stats from dead ball leagues that were not Major League Baseball in 1969, they should have integrated the Negro League stats. They decided not to, and it has finally happened today. Josh Gibson is getting all the plug, but Oscar Charleston, Pop Lloyd, all the other amazing players that you will read about in the links below, take the time to do so. You will not regret it. Now, I had to cover this because he's been my guy. He's been my best pick so far this season. And Shota Imanaga has been phenomenal. Don't get me wrong. He's been above my expectations for him as my National League Rookie of the Year pick. But he finally got lit up. Now, the Brewers, Christian Yelich hit a bomb off of him. It was the first extra base hit a lefty had off of him all season. And he got shelled, 8 hits, 7 earned runs, 2 home runs given up, 1 walk, 1 strikeout. Really bad performance out of Imanaga. This is going to happen. This happens to the best of the best. They get shelled. And did I expect him to have a sub 1.2 ERA? Absolutely not. But do I expect him to be good more times than not when he goes out there? Absolutely. His stuff plays. And even if teams are adjusting to certain things, I know his splitter, his last 2 starts, has not been the exact same pitch it was early in the season. He will be fine. And I am excited to see what Imanaga does in this next start to bounce back in a way or two from what we just saw against Milwaukee. But also, Shota Imanaga, I think, has the ability down the stretch to garner some Cy Young consideration. And I think this will be a real good test for him and his character, because right now the Cubs are a team that don't have the most elite starting rotation, and the bullpen has been really struggling. So for Imanaga to be able to lock things down again and get the Cubs back on track will be big for their division push there in the Central. So Imanaga, reality check for all the people that hopped on the hype train with me and got way out in front of me. This is some humble pie. Enjoy it, savor it, move back, and we will move forward knowing that, yeah, Shota Imanaga wasn't going to have a sub-2 ERA all year, which he still does, 1.87. It went up to. But he's going to be a very good pitcher that could have a sub-3 ERA and garner Cy Young potential votes. So have patience. Things will come. Shota Imanaga will be fine. Now, here at the Solo Shot Sports Podcast, we like to throw it back down the third base line to this day in baseball history. And I have to say, June 1st had so many possibilities. There were amazing performances by Hall of Famers. There were debuts. There was no-hitters. But I've talked about Nolan Ryan and his no-hitters before. And it was his fourth career no-hitter. There was a player who gets his flowers quite a bit, is one of the most popular players of all time, but I don't think it is the same thing as what his expectations were. So on this day, Ken Griffey Jr. was selected as the number 1 overall pick in the MLB draft. Truly one of the greatest players of all time, and being drafted first overall in 87 was a lot of pressure. He was the son of a major league all-star. He was born on the same day in the same place as one of the greatest hitters that ever lived in Stan Musial, and he made the major leagues at 19 years old. He skyrocketed through the system and changed baseball life in Seattle. This is a guy who won an MVP, was a 13-time All-Star, won 3 home run derbies, won 10 gold gloves for his supreme defense in center field, had 7 silver sluggers, and won an All-Star MVP as well. 83.8 career WAR, 2,781 hits, 630 home runs, and a 284 batting average. He's a guy who scored over 1,600 runs, drove in over 1,800 runs, and stole nearly 200 bases. And he's looked at in a lot of ways as a disappointment. People think that Ken Griffey Jr., because he had the potential to be the greatest player of all time and was billed as such every step of the way, high school, major leagues, he's supposed to be the next coming, that because his numbers trail in comparison to Babe Ruth and Barry Bonds, that he was missed potential. And Ken Griffey Jr., much like Mickey Mantle, who's another very popular player, did suffer through some injuries. So there is that what could have been with Ken Griffey Jr. But people act like he was very disappointing. When you look at the numbers, and they are fantastic. They are a home run and a half for that number 1 overall pick back in 1987. And I don't think enough of that gets talked about. The Major League Baseball draft will be happening just shortly this year, but the pressure that comes, especially with being the number 1 overall pick, everyone remembers the number 1 overall pick, doesn't get talked about enough. And I think the Hall of Fame has noticed this because there's only 3 players ever selected number 1 overall in the Major League Baseball draft that have made the Hall of Fame. Harold Baines, Ken Griffey Jr., and Chipper Jones. Now, there's one player active right now that is well on his way in Bryce Harper. And there's another player who I think has a really good shot in Garrett Cole. But the pressure that comes with being the number 1 overall pick, living up to the hype, more so than the number 10 overall pick that did half as well in his career. There's so much pressure there, and it doesn't get talked about enough, especially for Ken, who was the son of a Major League All-Star. And for him to have this inner circle Hall of Fame career, truly, truly something we should all bow in amazement to. And there's a reason why he was popular. And it's not just because of the swag, the backwards hat, the chains. It was because he was one of the best players in the game. And for a stretch, you could argue the best player in baseball. Doesn't get talked about enough for his baseball prowess, for his baseball career. As the character, as the figure, as the swingman, he gets talked about an awful lot and people love him. But for what he actually was able to do on the diamond, he does not get his flowers. A lot of people call him overrated. A lot of people call him a disappointment. A lot of people call him a what could have been. If you're calling someone with 630 home runs a what could have been, you should be praising them. Because look at what they were. But I digress. The steroid era has a lot to do with it. Guys that were putting up performances that kept Ken Griffey Jr. flying under the radar. But a lot of those guys from the steroid era did not put together the overall career, the baseball reference page, if you will, that Ken Griffey Jr. did. And it did not shock me when he broke Tom Seaver's record for the highest percentage of Hall of Fame votes before Mariano Rivera obviously became the first unanimous guy. Ken Griffey Jr. should have been unanimous and is one of the true inner circle baseball legends, a guy who I was lucky enough to see the end of his career and that sweet swing that he still had, being able to jump on a fastball. Now, this month was mad. I talked about one of the best players in baseball having a terrible injury. I talked about historic statistical integration that happened here in the major leagues. Even talked about Rookie of the Year pick getting shelled for the first time in a major league start. But I didn't even talk about how good Aaron Judge has been in the month. First player in major league history in a 20-game stretch to have 11 home runs and 12 doubles. This is a guy who now leads the major leagues in OPS, a guy who just hit his 20th home run last night and is on pace to be in the MVP race again while healthy. He's one of the best players in the game. And him and Juan Soto hitting 2-3 is truly an amazing thing for the sport. I talked about Chris Sale's performance for the Braves, but there's two other starting pitchers in the American League that deserve their flowers too. Luis Gil, who's looking like the favorite for the American League Rookie of the Year right now, has the lowest batting average against in baseball at 138. This is a guy who is missing bats and providing soft contact. He's been really awesome. He has the neck tattoo that says, "God bless me." That kind of swagger you cannot teach, and he's been a big member of the Yankees so far this season, and why they're doing so well, because they lost Garrett Cole to begin the year, and he has stepped up and pitched like an ace. Then there's Seth Lugo, who leads baseball now actually in ERA with a 1.72, and this is a guy who is a converted reliever into a starter, signed a contract with Kansas City, and has been a big part of Kansas City's resurgence this year. The quality innings that the Seth Lugos and the Michael Wakas have been able to bring over behind my AL Cy Young pick, Cole Reagans, who's been very good as well, has been really awesome to see, and they've been playing a lot of baseball. I told you they'd be one of the more improved teams across the league. And the Cleveland Guardians, you see Jose Ramirez is there. They are on such a pace right now that even if they play 500 or slightly below 500 baseball the rest of the way, they're going to be in a really good spot to make the postseason in the American League. So I just want to give the Cleveland Guardians some respect. I feel like I haven't given them enough on this podcast because of my fondness for the Minnesota Twins and my excitement for this Royals just breakout, I guess you would say. But the Cleveland Guardians have been amazing, and Jose Ramirez is back after a down 2023. When I picked him to be MVP, he is having an MVP caliber season here so far in 2024. And I will leave things off with the two altercations that have kind of subsided, the two guys that are no longer in the sport. First, Angel Hernandez retired, an umpire who had not worked a World Series since 2005, and a guy who had been called out for many blown calls, finally retired from the league. There's a great video out on YouTube over on Baseball Doesn't Exist talking about how Angel Hernandez really isn't that bad when you look at the number of umpire mistakes over the years and the average scores and how they do. But he got singled out because players didn't like him and because he had some really egregious calls and some national televised moments. So Angel Hernandez, being an umpire, it's a thankless job. And I wish you the best in retirement. And I think it'll be good for your mental health and for your family to just get out of that situation because it has been toxic for a long time now. And finally, the glove throw heard around the world. Jorge Lopez threw his glove into the stands after giving up a bomb, and he was cut after his comments circled, which I have a lot of disdain for the people that ran with the misquote. He was clearly saying that he is the worst teammate in Major League Baseball, and everyone ran with the quote saying that he said he's with the worst team in Major League Baseball. I'm leaving the swears out. And I think that he was clearly frustrated. He's a guy that clearly cares, and despite the Mets' struggles, wants to win games, doesn't want to be responsible for losses. But the way he talked in his interview, saying, if they still want me here tomorrow, it made me know that he was not going to be a Met for the entire rest of the season. And, Jorge Lopez, you're not a star by any means, but you got done dirty by the media quote and by the whole situation. And I hope that you're able to get a job in Major League Baseball down the road. But I think there's going to be a little bit of a break, unfortunately, with how things went down. And that was the month of May. If you look across the league, there are some clear teams that are out in front. Like I said, the Dodgers, the Phillies, the Yankees are three of the best teams in Major League Baseball. But just circling around the league, the Orioles are well above 500 yet again. The Royals and the Twins are playing good baseball as well. And then in the AL West, right now, the Rangers and Astros are around the same point. And Seattle is getting very lucky and is slightly ahead of them at the moment. And it'll be interesting to see if Seattle can keep their pace ahead of the Texas teams or if that will get closer over time. The Milwaukee Brewers lead the NL Central right now with the Cardinals, who have resurfaced right behind them. The Cubs and, to a lesser degree, the Pirates and the Reds are in it as well. And right behind the Dodgers now, 5.5 games, is the San Diego Padres and the Giants, who have won 11 of their last 13 games. Really interesting division there because I think the Dodgers are gonna win it. But I picked the Padres and Diamondbacks to make the playoffs. And now the Giants, with the Blake Snell signing and the things that they've been able to do, Matt Chapman as well, those three teams are very close together. And I think that one or two of those teams might miss the playoffs because of how close together they are. It'll be interesting to watch how that unfolds. And the Rockies, Marlins, and White Sox, like I said last month, their season is over. I appreciate you guys watching. As always, I hope you guys have a great Solo Shot Saturday and rest of your week. If your team had a great month in May, I hope for another great month in June. If your team had a mixed or disappointing May, there's still another month here in June before we get into All-Star talk. I'll catch you guys next Solo Shot Saturday. Have a good one.